Gotta go fast. You're watching full screen boss fight.
Hi. So, Final Fantasy composer Nobou Uematsu says directors are silencing game music. Now, I listen to a lot of video game music while I'm working, while I'm driving around, while I'm just kind of drawing. It's been a big part of my life for a very long time. I can almost say with certainty that I listen to video game music as much as I listen to, like, say, rap or rock or like heavy metal or any other genre, because it's good. There used to be a point where there was fantastic video game music everywhere. There still is. I got to give credit to people like T Lopes, because he ate off of Sonic Mania. He fucking ate off of Sonic Mania. And the work that he's doing on Shinobi with Yuzo Koshiro, fantastic. So back in the day, there's some really interesting soundtracks that I kind of hold in high regard. The Nightshade soundtrack is actually really dope. First Tim Fallon soundtrack I listened to was Treasure Master, which the opening music for Treasure Master, he was a big fan of Starsky and Hutch, which he actually did the Starsky and Hutch soundtrack for the PS2 game, or it was a multi-plat game, but I have it on PS2. He did a lot of LJN games like Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer is probably his most popular soundtrack that people recognize his music from. For a game that was balls hard and broken in a lot of parts, that soundtrack really made a difference. If you really want to listen to some great Tim Fallon shit, listen to I think it's the Amiga version of Puznik. I'm over here meat riding on Tim Fallon, but I'm a big fan of technical stuff. If people composers have a really high range of technicality, I'm impressed by that. This is why I like listening to Thundercat. This is why I like listening to Jeff Beck. You have a high level of capability. I'm on board. I want to see how far you're going to take this. But let me get into the article here. So the man who gave Final Fantasy its soul says modern game music has none, blaming meddling directors and producers for stripping composers of their creative freedom and leaving everything sounding like bland movie trailers. Nobou Uematsu, legendary composer responsible for many of Final Fantasy's most iconic themes, has delivered a rather sobering assessment of the modern game music landscape, and this is not exactly a glowing review. In recent interviews with Japanese outlet Real Sound, Uematsu lamented that the game music has become less weird and more sterile, pointing the finger directly at directors and producers who he claims now hold far too much power over the creative process. Now, this isn't the first time that we actually heard of the term weird being used in game design or game music design. Yoko Taro talked about this not even a couple months ago, about how video game AAA development lacks the weird developers to actually make really awesome stuff. In this instance, Uematsu is talking about the actual video game composer end, which is losing its weird component because directors have a certain standard that they want or whatever. My guess is that they want more cinematic stuff. They want things that are closer to the Dark Souls games or Bloodborne or things like that. This is something that happens a lot in the game industry. The moment something actually hits peak popularity, or the moment it hits popularity, there's a lot of people that look at that and think, I want that for me. It's like that meme, Lord, I see what you did for this person and I want that for me. They basically want the same type of thing that this person has in this game. Now, understanding that if everybody is having that same idea, all you're doing is drowning out the medium with the similar things and boring the ever-loving crap out of everybody in the process. It's one of those things where you tend to see this in movies too. One movie does very well and everybody else has to take the same thing. The Matrix is the one thing that comes to mind here. Everything had bullet time in it during that time period. Everything. It was a groundbreaking moment when it was done in Lost in Space, which actually predated The Matrix by at least about a year. And then yeah, you saw commercials where it had bullet time and everything had bullet time in it, and it was like it lost its luster because it was so overdone to the point of absurdity. So this is the same thing that happens in the industry every time something gets really popular. And that leads to where we are now, where everything just kind of feels meh. There's a couple of things that stand out in the industry currently, but for the most part, AAA wise, it's kind of everything's Bloom, everything's like ray tracing, everything is basically Unreal Engine. It's a far cry from the PS3 360 era where you had games like Arkham City where people actually did like baked in lighting and these scenes that were just freaking beautiful because someone actually took the time to art direct the shit out of that to make it look like a well-lit city. When you actually let people work and let people actually do what they're supposed to, then you get things like that. According to Uematsu, the era when game composers could run wild with their own strange ideas has largely passed, whereas older titles gave musicians the freedom to inject their personal quirks and experiment with styles. Newer productions demand what he described as movie soundtrack-like music, orchestrated and predictable. The end result, he says, is that game scores are sounding more homogenous and far less interesting. So everything has to be Dark Souls, orchestrated soundtracks, everything has to be by the numbers, or you got to have that Hans Zimmer score. You got to let people, especially musicians, you got to let them run wild. You got to let composers run wild. You just give them a moment to look at the scenes from a game and let them compose from them, because that's what movies used to do. When people were putting movies out or whatever, you just gave them the actual scenes from the film. They didn't have sound to them, and you let the composer kind of build off of that or whatever. That's the whole reason why you had the soundtracks from, like, say, Indiana Jones or Star Wars or stuff like that. You gave those composers that amount of leeway to create those things. Now we're just making everything bland and homogenous. It's fantastic. Uematsu stressed that this isn't due to a lack of talent among newer composers, but rather the stifling influence of those in charge, with producers and directors demanding safer and more cinematic tracks. There's little room left for bold experimentation or risk-taking. The trend, he warns, could leave game music stuck in an endless loop of polished but soulless background noise. He has offered to give advice to younger composers. Find something that only you can bring to the table. Don't just mimic film scores because the higher-ups want it. Instead, inject your own sensibilities and unique quirks, even if they are strange or unconventional. Without that individual voice, Uematsu believes that the medium's musical evolution could grind to a halt. Now, I'm assuming this is mainly in the AAA space, because there was a point where we had some really great... I just kind of thought of another composer. Jesper Kyd, who actually worked on a lot of the Assassin's Creed games. My favorite track that he did was The Adventures of Batman and Robin for the Genesis, which was straight up industrial music. we're talking industrial music from like the mid 90s. And I was like, I went to go back to listen to that. I want to say back in 2012, I went back to listen to it. I'm like, yo, this is dope. Do me a favor, pause this real quick. Go listen to the Adventures of Batman and Robin OST on the Genesis and look up the boss theme Harley Quinn track. I can't explain it. It's just fucking amazing. You could just swim in that bass. It was just like, it just envelops around you. Many will find this stance of creator individuality as being stifled familiar, as the same could be said about mainstream video game development as a whole. Now, that goes back to what I was saying with the whole few generations ago when people were actually building and creating things. Things had a house style to them. Like you could tell a Rocksteady game from, say, something that somebody else made, or you could tell a Double Fine game from like what somebody else made or whatever. Now, gaming kind of risks hitting that level of homogeny that's just kind of bland and uninteresting. If we don't do something about that on the AAA end, the AAA end's gonna pretty much hit a point where it's gonna stagnate. It's gonna get worse. I don't think the industry is gonna completely crash out or anything like that, because even if the AAA market kind of fell off, you still have the AA market, which is actually kind of building itself back up again, and you have the indies. So I don't think there's going to be a like complete crash like in 1983 or anything like that, but I think that the AAA market is kind of on borrowed time at this point, and it's mainly because of the choices that they're making. I think the gaming industry as a whole needs to take more chances, honestly. I think that a less risk-averse gaming industry is a more vibrant game industry, less dependent on the Unreal Engine and building their own stuff and building their own assets, whatever. That would make more unique looking games, and it would definitely help. Capcom not depending on the RE engine as much as they are for every game that they put out would be nice, but there's a lot of sunk cost fallacy stuff that's going on with a lot of these companies and a lot of these publishers. But anyways, I'm out of here. Thank you for joining for this. See you next boss fight. Take care.